Hello everyone, this is News Reporter Jack reporting to you live with the news, and I just have one question for everybody. What is the lost cause? I don't know. Do you know? Do you know? Nobody knows, but today we're going to find out what the lost cause is, and we're going to visit Mr. Antonio's class to find out just what's going on. I'm sorry. I've got several complaints about yelling about the news, but today we're going to find out just what's going on and what is the lost cause. Did you lose something? Once again, News Reporter Jack gets so excited about the news that he forgets to introduce me. My name is Youth Pastor Emmanuel, and I want to talk to you very briefly today about Galatians 5:13. It pertains a lot to what's going on and what they're going to be talking about in Mr. Antonio's class as they try to find out what is the lost cause. Now, Galatians 5:13 tells us this: "You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but not to use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love." Now, there's a couple of things here. God called Christians to be free, and that freedom is something that God gives, and He wants us to be free from things like the law or oppression. When I say oppression, that means people try to make you do a bunch of things. Now, I'm not talking about your parents, because your parents tell you to do the right things, okay? Now, I'm talking about someone saying to you, walk down the street in the center, walk down the street on the left, walk down, and it just tells you a bunch of rules. Well, God wants us to be free from things like that and to follow Him. God wants us to have a purpose. He wants us to use our freedom not to indulge the flesh, which means to be selfish, and also to live a life contrary to how things are spelled out in the Bible. God wants us to serve each other in love. And also, there's a Bible verse in Micah chapter 6, verse 8. And I believe if the southern people had incorporated this, maybe there wouldn't have been a civil war. Now, God's writing to the prophet Micah, or I should say, God is speaking through the prophet. His name is Micah, and he says this: "He has shown you, O man, what is good, and what the Lord requires of you, to act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." Well, let's go to the classroom, see what they're doing today, and there's a person there. His name is Groundhog Bob, and what he does, he's going there to just see what's happening in the classroom. He's a news reporter also. Okay, everybody, today we have a special guest with us. It's Bob the Groundhog, and he is going to be with us today. So let's make sure he can have a seat someplace. Now, I want to talk to you about the lost cause, and it's about the Civil War, which we've been looking at, and I want to just go briefly with it through to you, if that's okay. All right. Now, the term "the lost cause" was sometimes applied by writers observing the Confederate war effort against the larger industrialized might of the North. It appeared in the title of a book that was written in 1866 by a Virginian journalist. His name was Edward Pollard. The Lost Cause, a new Southern history of the War of the Confederates. According to Pollard, the term was inserted at the request of his publisher in New York City, who feared Pollard's original title, History of the Cause or History of the Civil War, would not be catchy enough to sell books. And really it was the history of the war. I'm sorry, I said history of the Civil War. Now, he did that so he could sell more books. He called it The Lost Cause. Alright? Now, Pollard promoted many of the themes of the Lost Cause, such as the claim of states' rights, that the war was taken away and forced the Southerners to defend themselves against Northern aggression. He dismissed the role of slavery in starting the Civil War and understood and did not try to explain the cruelty that African Americans had received under slavery. Now, this is all important because it helps us understand why you had a lot of things like the Ku Klux Klan and everything else. So this was certainly something that we need to understand, because after the Civil War, what happened was the South wanted to make everything look like, they were just fighting to preserve their way of life and just trying to make sure they were good people and all that, but that's not really how things went. Now, let me get back to everything. They had stories in the book about happy slaves and beloved slave owners. And that became propaganda to defend slavery and explain how things to the slavery to people who lived in the North. There was a group called the United Daughters of the Confederacy, and they had a faithful slave memorial, and it was erected from a guy whose name was Hayward Stewart. And you can find this in Harper's Ferry, Virginia, West Virginia, I'm sorry. Now, explaining the Confederate defeat and an assertion is made that main factor, in other words, the Confederates lost the war because the North was more industrialized, they could supply themselves pretty much for a long time, and, well, that's what happened. It was a bloody conflict. Millions of people got killed. Well, not millions, but thousands of people got killed. And 25% of the male population of the South was killed in the Civil War. And it was called the Lost Cause because they lost the Confederacy. And they broke away from the Union, but the Union fought back. Now, after the Civil War, white Southerners wanted to portray the South in a positive light, erecting Confederate monuments to memorialize Confederate generals in support of the false narrative that the Confederates fought to preserve state rights, not slavery. African Americans, such as the 19th century civil rights activist Frederick Douglass, opposed the erection of Confederate monuments. In 1870, Douglass wrote, "Monuments to the lost cause will prove monuments to folly," or monuments where people made mistakes. And the memories of a wicked rebellion which they necessarily perpetrated is a needless record of stupidity and wrong. Oh, wait, you have a question? Let's see what the question is. I have a question! Oh, look, this is Calvin. I want to know, just, when they say state rights, this was just slavery? Wow! What a place! Well, I'm sorry, everybody. I thought they were talking about the right to play Madden football. Why is everybody looking at me? Okay, Calvin, just to answer your question, back then they didn't have video games, so that wasn't the lost cause, okay? And, well, I understand. Well, let me just go on. On May 30th, okay, I said that, 1871, during the national celebration of Memorial Day, the tomb of the unknown soldier in Arlington Cemetery, Virginia, Douglas gave a speech there about slavery as meaning and making the cause for the Civil War. In other words, he tried to justify the Civil War. We are sometimes asked, he said, in the name of patriotism, to forget the merits of the fearful struggle and to remember with equal administration those who struck at the nation's life and those who struck to save it, those who fought for slavery and those who fought for liberty and justice. I'm no minister of malice. I would repel the... Oh, I thought someone had a question. Let me go on. Frederick Douglass said, I would repel the people. My tongue cleaves to my mouth if I forget the difference between parties that bloodied the conflict. Now you're probably asking yourself, what does all that mean? Frederick Douglass was upset about slavery, and he wanted to honor the people that actually gave their lives to make certain that African Americans were free. Now there was another gentleman by the name of John Mitchell. He was an African American news reporter, and he was an editor, and he was a banker and a civil rights activist in the 19th century and the 20th centuries from Richmond, Virginia, who advocated against the erection of a statue for Robert E. Lee. He tried to block its funding, but a white conservative majority prevailed. On May 29, 1890, the statue was unveiled during a celebration, and Mitchell covered the event in the Richmond Planet. He wrote, "This glorification of states' rights doctrine, the right of succession, and the honoring of men who represented that cause fosters in the Republic the spirit of rebellion and will ultimately result in the handing down to generations unborn a legacy of treason and blood." Now, the national debate over the Reconstruction, and that was the period after the Civil War, there's a lot of debate on that. Now, in December 1863, less than a year after the Emancipation Proclamation, and let me explain to you what the Emancipation Proclamation was. This was a document that President Lincoln signed, and what it said was if a slave was to escape to the north or to the northern, the Union lines, they would be free. Now, the Emancipation Proclamation did not free all the slaves. It only freed slaves in the states that were in rebellion against the Union. So that's important. Slaves that were in Maryland, Delaware, and also some parts of Kentucky, they were not free. Okay? So that's important. They weren't free until December of 1864. Now, you have a question, Shaniqua?
Okay, my question is, did African Americans have rights after the Civil War? Did they have equal rights?
Okay, that's a good question about equal rights, and I'm going to get into that. Now, in April of 1865, Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president, was assassinated. Now, after he was assassinated, his vice president, Andrew Johnson, became president, and once he became president, It was during the period of Reconstruction. Johnson offered something that was different because he was from the South. He pardoned all the Southerners from that fought in the war, all the Southern soldiers that fought against the Union. He pardoned them. Okay? Now, he did that, and that wasn't received well with a lot of people. Now, he restored their political rights and their property rights, except the right to own slaves. He also outlined how the new state governments would be created. Apart from the requirement that they abolish slavery, they could, and they also had to repudiate the succession. That means they had to disagree with going to fight against the Union, and they also had to say they disagreed with being a confederacy. They tried to conform to Confederate States of America. Now, these governments were granted a free hand in managing their own affairs, but they responded very evil towards African Americans. They enacted something called black codes, which restricted African Americans in a lot of different ways. And it also hurt them too in a lot of different ways too. But we're going to get into about equal rights. And African Americans had to sign yearly labor contracts and other ways they sought to limit their freedom. Okay? There was something called the Freeman's Bureau, and we're going to get into that in a little bit here. African Americans strongly resisted the implementation of a lot of measures that Andrew Johnson was trying to enact because it really discriminated against them. When Congress assembled in December of 1865, the radical Republicans such as Thaddeus Stevens of Pennsylvania and Charles Sumner of Massachusetts called for an establishment of a new Southern government based on equality before the law and universal male suffrage. In other words, they wanted to recognize, make sure that people who were suffering from things, they wanted to recognize what was going on. But the more numerous moderate Republicans hoped to work with Johnson while modifying his position. Congress refused to seat representatives from the southern states that had won elections in 1866. And this was a part of the Freeman's Bureau and Civil Rights Bills, which was signed in 1866. There was a Civil Rights Bill in 1866. Now, African Americans had elected their first representatives, and white Southerners and also other whites did not want to seat them in Congress. That's right. Now, does someone have, no one has a question? Okay, I thought Bob the groundhog had a question. Now, in 1865, the second definition, there was another part that was put into the 13th Amendment. Well, actually, that's the 14th Amendment. But there was an amendment put into the Constitution about citizenship, birthright citizenship. So African Americans would become citizens of the United States, and any children that they have, okay, birthright citizenship, they would have, those children would become citizens of the United States because they weren't considered citizens of the United States. All right? So that happened. Now, just to let you know, like I said, the Civil Rights Act of 1866 became the first significant legislation in American history to become law. Oh, wait, someone has a question? What's your question? Okay, I have a question. I'm Greg. Look, I just want to know, what part, how did African Americans get the rights, and also what they were treated mean? I just want to know, how did they get the right to vote and all those things. I didn't know they could vote back in 1865 and 18. I thought that was just recent. I didn't know. Okay. Well, let me talk about African Americans and how they got their rights. Now, 1866, the Civil Rights Bill was signed, and when that was signed, basically it gave African Americans the right to vote, and also stated that they should be treated equally. Now, President Andrew Johnson certainly fought against this, and states came up with something called black codes, where they could begin to discriminate against African Americans. But let's go through the 3 constitutional changes that took place, all right? Because they're very important. First, well, it's not a constitutional change, it was the Emancipation Proclamation. Remember, it was to free slaves if they could get to the Union lines. This was during the Civil War, and also if they were to escape to the North, they would be free. Now some slaves people were kept in slavery until December of 1865, all right? Just remember that. I said 1864, it was actually 1865. Now, that was the signing of the 13th Amendment, and they were enslaved in places like Delaware, Maryland, and Kentucky. They did not fight against the Union, so they were able to keep their slaves. Now, the 13th Amendment abolished slavery and involuntary servitude. In other words, you couldn't have someone be a slave that they didn't want to be your slave. Or slavery was abolished in the United States, period. The 14th Amendment guarantees equal protection under the law granted for African Americans and birthright citizenship, which means African Americans that are born on U.S. soil automatically become U.S. citizens. Now, the 15th Amendment granted African Americans the right to vote and prohibits federal, state, and local governments from denying African Americans the right to vote. Oh, so let's find out what Youth Pastor Emmanuel has to say to us now. All right, everybody. Well, that was Mr. Antonio's class. He was talking about the Civil War and the lost cause. And the lost cause was the South, the Confederate States, lost the war. And they lost what they were fighting for, states' rights, which meant they wanted to enslave people. Well, they lost that right to do that. And next, we're going to talk about something more exciting, and that's African American excellence. I'm sure that you want to watch the next thing, because as we celebrate our 250th year as American citizens and living in the United States, we have to always keep in mind African Americans have excellence in them. And I want to tell you something. We're about to learn just how excellent African Americans are. Remember the Bible verse, it was 2 of them. Galatians 5:13, where it talks about we don't want to be selfish, but we want to serve one another. And I'm sorry, guys. I had a cough. Was that nice? No, I don't know. Micah 6:8, where it talks about he has shown you, O man, what is good. What does the Lord require of you? And remember these 3 things, everybody. To act justly, to love justice, or do justice, to love mercy, show mercy to people, and walk humbly with your God. Have a great day, and I'll see you real soon.